How's it going, everyone? Grim here, and I want to do a tips video, and this actually might be a multi-parter on the new Arks of Omen boarding actions game. For those of you who don't know, Games Workshop just released this new game based off of the 40k rules, but it has some additional rules specific to this game, and it was designed, at least most people believe, it was designed by Games Workshop to be more of an introductory, new player friendly type of game. It's designed to be played at a much smaller scale than what you would normally see in a 40k game. So if you're a new player, and you want to start learning how to play 40k, buying all the models to build a 2,000 point army can be kind of pricey. Now, there are several videos on YouTube and several websites online that talk about how you can get the most bang for your buck if you want to build a particular faction army, right? 2,000 points for Adeptus Custodes, for example. You can pick up the combat patrol boxes. You can pick up that battle box that just came out in December of 2022, and that'll save you the most money to put together your army. Stuff like that. So it's possible to save money in building a 2,000 point army, but it's still pretty pricey. And for a brand new player, I don't know if they're really willing to invest all that money to learn a game that they may not like, right? So this new boarding actions game, that's great because it's relatively cheap to start playing this game. At least that's what everybody's thinking. So at the time of this recording, Games Workshop released a Space Marine boarding patrol, kind of like a combat patrol box, that's designed for this game, where it's a 500 point army, and it is only 110 US dollars. And Games Workshop has released news that it's going to be making a whole bunch of these boarding patrol boxes, which should probably all be about the same price, 110 US dollars. And they're designed specifically to provide the buyer a 500 point army that they can use in the boarding actions game. And so that's, if you think about it, $110, that's a reasonable investment in something you think you might like. It is $110, and for some people that's quite a bit of money. But for those who play wargaming or model building, $110 is a good sample amount for, hey, let me try this game, see if I like it. And if I don't like it, well, I got some value out of it for learning how to play the game, for realizing I don't like the game, and it really only cost me $110. Okay, so I think that's a good price point. It's reasonable. Plus, with this game, you don't have to build and paint all of these different models to field a 2,000 point army like you would in Warhammer 40k. It's just a 500 point army. So we're talking a couple dozen, maybe 2 dozen individual models, and none of them are big models like vehicles or giant monsters, because those are not allowed in boarding actions. They're just small, normal models that you can build and paint relatively quickly because of the model count. So I think that's really good in terms of, hey, let's try and hook in these new players with this boarding actions version of Warhammer 40k. However, the online community is quick to point out that this game is actually kind of expensive, and Games Workshop did the exact opposite of trying to make it affordable for new players, and instead made it cost prohibitive for new players, because Arks of Omen boarding actions is played with scenarios specific to the book, the rule book, and they're designed to be played in the scenarios of a giant spaceship, these giant Arks of Omen space hulks that are floating around in space. You need to use specific terrain. So the whole lore of this is that, hey, let's say your faction of Space Marines is in space and they encounter this derelict space hulk, and they board it. They send over a small detachment, a boarding patrol of about 500 points worth of models. And then it just so happens on the other side of that Space Hulk, there's another faction that discovered it and decided to send its own boarding patrol onto that ship. And the both of these boarding patrols encounter each other in the hallways and the small rooms of this spaceship and start duking it out. Well, that's the terrain scenario that Arks of Omen utilizes. It's this, hallways, small rooms, no big structures or big terrain like a normal Warhammer 40k game. And so you have to use this specific terrain box set that Games Workshop released for Arks of Omen. And it is basically 2 Kill Team terrain boxes put together. And the problem is that it is $210 US. So if you're a new player, really now, instead of just spending $110 for one 500 point boarding patrol box of models, you now have to spend an additional $210 for the terrain, because you have to use this terrain. You can't just use any kind of terrain that you want that you normally would be able to in a typical 40k game. Maybe you can go halvesies with your friend because 2 people want to learn how to play, so they're going to play together. So each of them buy a $110 box, and each of them split the cost of the terrain. But basically you're talking about a couple $100 now for each brand new player who's not even hooked on the game yet, right? They're really just, hey, let's try and see if we like this game, if this game is interesting to us. And shelling out $200, more than $200, might be considered cost prohibitive. And that's the problem with the Arks of Omen terrain box. Well, here's a tip. If you don't want to spend $210 on that terrain box, why not make your own terrain? Right? So we know that we can't really use the normal, typical terrain for Warhammer 40k in boarding actions because those terrain pieces tend to be too big. So if we're going to make our own terrain pieces, we're going to make them smaller. And we have to make them modular because Arks of Omen, all the different missions have basically the same terrain pieces, but they're all hot swappable, right? They all connect and disconnect to each other in different shapes and lengths to form the different hallways and rooms of the different mission maps. So if we're going to make our own, it needs to be smaller, it needs to represent hallways and rooms, and it needs to be hot swappable where you can attach and detach to make these different hallways and rooms and shapes that are on the mission maps. How do we do that? The cheapest way, the easiest way we can. In my opinion, we use magnets. The Arks of Omen terrain kit does not use magnets. It uses friction connection where you have to take the 2 pieces and basically with friction put them together so they slide together and they basically stay together with just friction holding them together. And that may be a good thing or a bad thing. After a while of you keep disassembling them and reassembling them to make different mission maps, that friction point is not gonna last, right? And the pieces are gonna get looser and they're not gonna be able to stick well together. And eventually I think they'll just wear out. But magnets, if we can use magnets to hold our modular terrain pieces together, then that's great. I think that's a great idea. The problem is now you're talking about not only the cost of terrain, but the cost of magnets and magnetization and the time and effort it takes to magnetize these terrain pieces that we're going to be making. Well, I found a solution to that potential problem. And here it is. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you magnetic building tiles. This particular set is made by Picasso Tiles, and I did some research online to find out which are the best, because there's several different companies that make these very similar type of things where all these plastic pieces, but they're magnetized, right? Each of these black rectangles are magnets, and you can basically assemble and reassemble them into all these different shapes as you see fit. That's the whole point, because it's designed for little kids to have the fun, making whatever buildings and shapes they want. Well, my online research, most people agree that Picasso tiles has the strongest magnets. So I went with this. Now this box of 60 pieces, we're not going to need all 60 pieces. Instead, what we really want to focus on are these squares here. Okay? These squares here are the ones we're looking for. They are 3 inch by 3 inch. So they are tall enough to represent a corridor wall. And they are modular because you can attach them with magnets. Look at that. I just made a hallway with a dead end. Right? And so basically, you can now, through magnets, through these individual 3 by 3 inch tiles, make all the different terrain maps from Arks of Omen. Now these are slightly bigger. Arks of Omen, if you look at the pieces that come in the Arks of Omen terrain set, they're actually designed to be 60 millimeters tall. This is 3 inches, which is equal to 75 millimeters. So this is actually a little bit taller. And that means this is actually a little bit longer. Okay, so instead of 60 millimeters in length, each of these pieces is 75 millimeters in length. So your terrain is actually going to be slightly bigger than it normally would be with the Arks of Omen terrain pieces that you would get from that $210 set. But still worth it, because you can still use these to make all the different terrain maps that you need in order to play Arks of Omen. So if you get this particular 60 piece set on Amazon, it's currently going for about $26. All right, and really you're only going to need these. It comes with all of these pieces here for these big ones, and we just want these. And if you really want to, you can use these, because the 2 triangles will make a square, right? But these 24 squares, that's really what you want. And then what you're also going to do is you're going to get 2 of these. And these are on Amazon right now for $16 each. All right? So if you get 2 of these and that one big 60 piece set, you're going to have enough of these little squares to make all the maps in the Arks of Omen rulebook. These are really cool because what they are, as you can see, it says here, they're windows and doors, right? And you want these because you can pop out the windows and doors, and what you're left with is a frame. So you get this, a nice little window thing. Oh, look, open the window. All right. In Arks of Omen, there are doors, and doors are very important to the rules. So you need some of these terrain pieces to have doors. Well, this is not a door, but instead, you could use it as a door if you wanted to, right? But instead, what you're going to do is you're going to pop out these windows and doors, and you're going to get this part. And this is great to be one of those door tiles, right? So that you can then now have a door in your hallway that leads into a small room, or whatever the particular map says. Okay, now you can't just play it like this, unfortunately. The rules of the game require doors, and it requires doors that can both open and close, because those are within the rules. You can spend actions to open a door to go through it, and spend actions to close a door and keep it closed. Okay, so what you need to do is find yourself a good 3D printer, or you can use whatever hobbying superpowers you have to use this empty space here to make a door. What I did was I 3D printed a door frame and a door, and using tiny little metal pins, right, one on top, one on bottom of the hinge, I made myself a door with a door frame that can open and close as the rules require. And I just put that right into this empty space in the middle. And now I have a tile with a door that I can connect to these other tiles to make my Arks of Omen terrain. Just like that. Alright. Now if you don't have a 3D printer, like I said, you're going to have to figure out a good way to make that happen with some cool modeling voodoo or superpowers that you may have. You know, find some cardboard to fit in here. Make the doors with hinges using cardboard. That's cool. Or if you want to use some kind of special plastic, you can buy a lot of plastic sheets in the modeling community. You can go to a modeling store, or you can get it online from Amazon or wherever. These sheets of plastic that are specifically designed for these miniature modeling, where you can cut it up into whatever size you want, right? And you can use that if you don't have a 3D printer. But the point is utilizing 2 of these, because I know it says 30 pieces, but it's actually 12 of these actual tiles. They count the little windows and doors, which is, you know, BS. But it's 12 tiles, so you get 2 of these to make 24 tiles. And that 60 piece bigger set had 24 of these squares in it. 24 plus 24 makes 48 of these pieces, and that's enough to do the Arks of Omen mission maps. So that's my recommendation for making your own. Remember, the 60 tile set was only $25 or $26. 2 of these are $32. So you're looking at, you know, little over 50 bucks US to make all of the terrain you need for the Arks of Omen, to replace that terrain box that costs $210. Now, the terrain box does come with a cardboard floor that shows like the mapping, and, you know, it shows where to put the tiles to make the walls and stuff like that. So, you know, you're gonna have to figure out a way of doing that. There is a solution that I did not buy yet, but this specific Picasso tiles, if you look at what I showed you earlier, this box set comes with 4 of these, you know, 4x4, so it's basically 6 inches by 6 inches. Well, they make bigger ones that are, you know, 3x2, and you can buy a box set where it's all just a bunch of these 3x2s and 3-inch long ones, 3x1s. So those 3x1s can be used to make long corridors, and the 3x2 pieces, they have in fact they have 4x3 pieces in them, right? And those 4x3 pieces, when you put them all together, you could use that as the actual floor for the entire mission map. So you buy one of those, that you can get on Amazon for $60. So if you want to make your entire floor of the map, instead of the cardboard that comes with the Arks of Omen terrain set, you want to make it these plastic pieces that you can then, because they have magnets in them too, you can put all the tiles on to make the corridors and rooms, and those will all magnetize to that floor utilizing those big 3x4 pieces. Then you have your entire map, and you can change these out to your heart's content, however you want, however the mission map dictates, because it's all magnetized, right? So $59 for that, plus a little over $50 for this. Now you're talking $110. You're gonna have to paint them, right? Because, I mean, it's up to you. You can play with them like this perfectly fine, but I would imagine if you want to, you can paint them. You can take these doors and windows that you removed from all of these, and you can glue them on to these normal walls to make different patterns and different terrains. So it's something like this, right? This is going to be a wall that I glued on just 2 pieces of the windows. So it kind of looks like just, you know, 3 dimensions on the wall. You have this one here, right in the middle. Kind of looks like one of those church stained glass window type of things, right? And for the Imperium, religion is a big thing, right? So there's a lot of that religious iconography. You can paint this, the gray or the black or the whatever you want the walls to be, and then you can go in there with color to make like a little stained glass thing, whatever you want. Anyway, or you could just leave the walls standard, right? Paint them, don't paint them. The whole point was that using these magnetized tiles, these Picasso tiles, which are almost perfect, they're a little bit bigger, but almost perfect, they can be used to replace that very expensive $210 Arks of Omen terrain set. And now you have this wonderful magnetized kit that you can break down, stack, look at that, stack perfectly nicely, put it in a small box, and take that to your next game. In the next video, I'm going to show you how I decided to quickly paint these up, because I wanted to do them without just these clear plastic things, right? So I'm going to paint it up and make it nice and simple, passable. I'm not trying to win any, Golden Demon awards here by painting terrain, but it's going to be passable. Until then, thank you all very much for joining me. If you have any comments about this or utilizing some other system to replace the Arks of Omen terrains, leave a comment. Otherwise, I hope you like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you all very much for joining me. Until next time, Grim out.